Well, earlier today, a U.S. District Court judge in Washington, D.C., sentenced 4 additional peaceful, they weren't breaking into college campus buildings, they weren't burning anything, they were peaceful pro-life advocates. They were sentenced to prison terms, including 2 defendants in their 70s. Now, this comes after Lauren Handy, along with 2 others, received their sentences yesterday, showing the extent to which the Biden administration has weaponized the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, or FACE, to target advocates for the unborn since the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Now, this week's excessive sentencing provides a stark contrast to the Biden administration's response to weeks of violent anti-Semitic protest on college campuses. Joining me now to discuss this and much more, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas. He serves on 4 committees, including the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Cruz, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Tony, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You have been very vocal about the weaponization of our government. Your reaction to these 70-year-old pro-life advocates being sentenced to nearly 3 years in prison?
This is utterly disgraceful, and it is a pattern we've seen from the very beginning of the Biden administration. They have weaponized the Department of Justice, they have weaponized the FBI, they have weaponized the entire federal government, and they use it to attack their enemies, to go after their political enemies. And there's no area where the double standard has been more stark than when it comes to the protection of innocent human life. They have targeted pro-life protesters. As you noted, these were peaceful protesters. They were not threatening violence. They were not engaged in violence. And yet the Biden Department of Justice hates what they were saying and is going to lock them up. And I will say it's a travesty of justice. This follows their arrest of Mark Houck, who was another pro-life protester, that they showed up at Mark Houck's house at dawn with FBI agents and machine guns raised, and arrested him in front of his 7 children. That case, thankfully, when they brought it to the jury threw it out within minutes and said, this is ridiculous. Tragically, with these pro-life protesters, the result was not that. And I have to say, you drew the contrast very clearly with the rabidly anti-Semitic protests at college campuses. To the best of my knowledge, the U.S. Department of Justice has made 0 arrests, has brought 0 cases, is not enforcing federal civil rights laws. The fact that there's now growing data that we have literally foreign terrorist organizations and foreign communist governments helping fund these anti-Israel, anti-Semitic protests, and yet the Biden administration is AWOL because politically they side with the anti-Semites and the people who hate America on campus, and so they're not willing to enforce the law against them.
Senator Cruz, we've known each other for a number of years. I know your father. I know the family story. What we see happening with our federal government and how it is targeting its opponents, it sounds very similar to what your dad fled in Cuba.
Yeah. Look, unquestionably, this is an abuse of power, and this is what banana republics do. Look, if you turn on CNN right now, I don't know why you would, but you will see CNN obsessed with following this ridiculous Trump trial in New York. You think about it, for over 200 years in our nation, we have never indicted a president, we've never indicted a former president. In the past year, partisan Democrat prosecutors have done so not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 different times. They are using the justice system to attack, yes, Donald Trump, because they hate him personally, but what they're really attacking is the American people, because the reason they're bringing these cases is they're terrified that the voters are going to vote to reelect Donald Trump as president. And so today's Democrats are perfectly willing to abuse power in order to stay in power. And we see it with these persecutions of Donald Trump. We see it with these persecutions of pro-life protesters. We also see it. Look, Merrick Garland, when he's testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I've asked him about night after night after night, there were protesters outside the homes of Supreme Court justices who were furious at the Dobbs decision. There is a federal law that makes it a crime to protest at the home of a federal judge seeking to influence a decision. Merrick Garland refuses to enforce the law. He simply, why? Because he sides with the radicals. It's the same reason he won't enforce the law with the anti-Semitic protesters at Columbia and NYU and Yale and Harvard and Berkeley and all over the place, because the Biden White House agrees with the anti-Israel protesters.
Senator, unlike your father who fled to the United States, a place of freedom, we don't have any place to go. How do we fix this?
Look, the only answer is to take the country back. And I pray that as things get worse and worse every day, that it opens people's eyes. Listen, we've never seen the abuse of power we're seeing now has no precedent in our nation's history. What we're seeing happening abroad, the war in Israel, a White House that sides with Hamas, that funds Hamas and cuts off weapons to Israel, that's never happened before. A Democrat Party that has a pro-Hamas wing. That is extreme and radical. An invasion at our southern border with 11 million illegal immigrants allowed to come into this country. All of this is unprecedented. But I do take solace from American history that politics has always been like a pendulum, and that when things go too far one way, the American people pull it back the other way. And I do think they have gotten so bad that a lot of people who maybe 4 years ago, when Joe Biden was saying, gosh, you know, aren't you tired of Trump's mean tweets? Maybe there's some voters that said, all right, I don't like the tweets, so I'll vote for Joe Biden and things will be calmer and nicer. Well, they weren't calmer, they weren't nicer. And I got to say, I think a lot of voters are thinking mean tweets sound pretty good right now. If it also means we end the wars in Ukraine and Israel, and we secure our southern border and protect our families and stop this relentless assault on our constitutional rights, I can put up with a whole lot of mean tweets for that.
Senator, I think you are absolutely right. I think we've had almost 4 years of this policy that has attacked every aspect of American life when you think about our fundamental freedoms. Senator, we're out of time. Always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today on Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate you.